Writing an introduction can be really tough, especially for students who are just learning about a particular research area. Maybe they just don't quite know the right flow of ideas. So I wanted to kind of guide you through how I generally approach writing an introduction, and I hope that this is helpful for you. So, some of the best writers that I have personally ever talked to or been mentored by have always described the introduction of a paper as looking like a carrot. So, what happens here is we start broad and we actually narrow down to the research question. But I've also been taught by a few different people that it's also helpful to have a little bit of a carrot at the top here. So let me explain kind of what this ends up looking like, because this model is probably a little bit difficult to understand. So we need to start with a hook. We always want to engage our readers, because if the start of our paper isn't any good, then people might stop reading, and that's the last thing that we want. So we want to get people engaged. Now, one of the very first things that comes to often to undergraduate students' minds is starting with a leading question. And leading questions are not effective. You know why it comes to your mind first? It's because it's fairly easy to come up with a leading question. But leading questions, while they are oftentimes meant to get people thinking, they don't really get people thinking. They're just a little bit on the bland side. So what we suggest is oftentimes to use things like quotes that a lot of people might be able to relate to, news stories, statistics. All of these types of things are great to really highlight the problem that you're going to be addressing, and then eventually transition in a not a very long paragraph. I mean, we're talking maybe a half a page max that you're dedicating to a hook and your research question here at the beginning of your introduction, because your whole introduction is only about 4 to 6 pages depending on the manuscript that you're writing. And it needs to be clear and concise. So we want to really quickly, right off the bat, hook our readers, and then we broaden slightly to our research question. This research question needs to be very, very clear and concise, and needs to be very obvious what you're going to be studying. So one of the introductions, I'm actually going to walk you through kind of my thought process on a recent paper that I've been working on. So in this study, we are actually examining, do men higher in masculine honor beliefs know how to look tough and look weak? And that might seem like kind of a silly question, but there's actually some really interesting caveats here, because masculine honor beliefs are associated with things like a drive for muscularity. And while men higher in masculine honor beliefs might know what weakness is, they might not actually be able to demonstrate it. On the other hand, because you can't just turn off your muscularity. On the other hand, though, if they know what weakness is, you might expect that they're more able to demonstrate. And that's kind of what we're testing in this study. But we start out with a real clear research question here. Sometimes I also give my hypotheses if they're going to make sense at this time in the paper. But since these have a little bit of nuance, I think that it's more important in this particular intro that I start to give some background. So next, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to then work my way from my research question back to my research question, because we always want the reader of our papers, once they get to the end of our intro, we want to remind them what our research question is. We want to give them our hypotheses at that point. And we want to make sure that they're excited about our study. The best feedback that you can get is, oh my gosh, I'm so ready for this study. I can almost predict exactly what the readers are going to do in this study just by reading the intro and not knowing anything about the methods. So now we need to start back at the top of this carrot. Not the carrot, I guess, the funnel here. So one of the first things that I've got to explain to my readers what the heck masculine honor beliefs are. So it's important that I discuss some of the most foundational work in this area of research and talk about, what are masculine honor beliefs? What are the expectations for men? What do they promote? And I explain that to my reader that masculine honor beliefs promote the use of defensive violence. So I'm going to guide the reader from a short description on what masculine honor beliefs are to the expectations that they place on men to use defensive violence. So this is, again, an expectation and a norm that men are kind of ready to defend themselves. So it's in that regard that I can transition into the preparation that men might engage in order to adhere to these expectations and norms. You know, some of this preparation includes preemptively addressing threats to masculine honor, because if you can stop them before they've even happened, that's great. And so, you know, one of the ways that men actually stop threats before they even happen is by looking tough. You know, no one's going to mess with you if you actually look tough. And so, you know, doing things like, you know, getting more muscular, that's a way to ward off threats. Now, retaliatory aggression comes in when men are actually responding to a threat to their masculinity, a threat to their family, their property, so on and so forth. So men need to be able to both ward off potential threats, but also then respond to threats if they do happen. And that's where things like looking tough, muscular come in, and then also having some fighting abilities if you're going to adhere to these standards of masculinity. Now, I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do. It's just this is an ideology that people can have. So you can see now I've guided the reader from what masculine honor beliefs are to what expectations and norms they set for men, how this then affects men's behavior and drive for muscularity, things like being able to win a fight, so fight training and things like that. And we just guide them through to kind of then talking about their then ability to actually gauge other men's fighting abilities, because I might know my own fighting ability, but I also need to know the fighting abilities of that other person. So we talk about here, you know, are they able to size up the competition, make sure they're actually going to win that fight, because in cultures of honor, if you lose a fight, that reflects pretty poorly on you. So eventually we come back to this idea, okay, it's probably clear that someone higher in masculine honor beliefs would be able to demonstrate toughness. That's kind of the obvious hypothesis in this study. And we're seeing, can they actually show that? Can they actually, based on the way that they stand, the way that they posture, the way that they talk to other people, can they actually demonstrate that? And it's probably true that they can demonstrate toughness. That's the easy hypothesis in this study. But the competing, or the secondary hypothesis is, you know, the research question here is, can they actually demonstrate weakness? And here's where we have kind of some competing hypotheses. So based on all of this research that we discussed to this point, I am now ready to understand the nuances with this hypothesis. On one hand, men are expected to know what weakness is, therefore they might be more able to demonstrate it. On the other hand, due to this preparation that we just talked about, the muscularity, you know, looking tough, being muscular, you can't just say, hey, muscles go away, I need to look weak here. And so men higher in masculine honor beliefs actually might not be able to demonstrate weakness. But it's through this entire build of this introduction that I've now told my reader exactly how to interpret these hypotheses. So finally, we come back to our research question, and now we are finally ready to understand the hypotheses of this study. So this is how we generally write an introduction. I highly suggest that you kind of model this out. A lot of people create outlines, but I think it's really important to make the outline like this. And this doesn't mean, like, I haven't even written this intro yet, but eventually I'm going to write this intro, and I'm probably going to start exactly like this. This doesn't mean that this is exactly how this thing pans out. It might read better, kind of mixing up the flow, mixing up the order here. You need to reevaluate a few different times. But right now, this is exactly how I would start writing this manuscript. This is how we work toward a great introduction. So I hope this was helpful for you. I hope this was helpful for your students. And please let me know if you have any questions on how to structure an introduction in the future.